All right, what's up? Welcome in. GC Live Monday morning episode. Wes Mitchell here. Chris Clark going to take you through what was just amazing night at Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday night. South Carolina getting the win over number 10 A&M. But first, let's say about our friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. Y'all know the drill. If you're in the market for a new home, hit up Clint. You want more information on Clint? Go to ClintHammond.com. Otherwise, just give him a call, shoot him a text. 803-422-6797. Got a text from Clint yesterday. Like everyone else in Gamecock Nation, my man was buzzing about this win. Excited, pumped as South Carolina improves to 5-3 overall, Chris, and just kind of completely, I would say, not changes the vibe of this season, but certainly when you compare it to the idea of 4-4, if it would have went the other way, this feels completely different. And I think continues. We'll get into some big picture thoughts later on, but just continues to maybe lock in the idea that, hey, this is a good football team for South Carolina. And, they've proven they can play with about anybody in the country. But we've got so much to get to. Let's dive right into it, man. I'll ramble, so I'll let you go first.
No, I'll ramble.
What's on your mind at this exact moment, Chris?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Where I've been this morning thinking about this thing is that this game had, I don't want to say it had everything, because in college football, there's so much that can happen. But it had so many elements that I think just made it special. Aside from just winning this football game, right? You had so many things that I think Gamecock fans have been hungry for, so many things that are really rewarding to look back on, right? You had hot start, which everybody wanted. Then you go down, right? Then you face that adversity head on. You tie it at halftime, right? You go out and completely dominate the second half. It's 24-0. You don't turn the football over at all. You have turnovers. You scheme up some brilliant plays with some new stuff, some more creative stuff, right? You had explosive plays, the touchdown to Josh Simon, the Rocket Sanders long touchdown run. You had, hey, we're going to line up and convert some short yardage plays. You caught some breaks. You had a strip of Lenore Sellers when he stepped up in the pocket that was wiped out by a penalty. You had Carolina really dialing back the amount of penalties that they had, where A&M, who had come into this pretty heavily penalized, as South Carolina has, A&M was the one that had the more painful penalties. You caught another break when Le'Veon Moss goes out very early in the game. So just so many things in this game, Wes, that went the right way for South Carolina. And quite frankly, they caused most of those things to go the right way. So not only was it a thrilling win where the fans get to storm the field after, but just, I think, really even more satisfying, right? Because of the way that you were able to do it, the manner in which you did it, I think was awesome. And so that's where my head's been this morning. There's obviously a lot more to dive into, but that was kind of a big picture thought.
Yeah, let's talk about that manner in which they did it. And so to me, I was like, all right, do we talk offense first? We talk defense? We talk staff? Do we talk what it means? And really for me, it kind of boils down to, all right, let's talk offense and defense. And one thing that was to me apparent on both sides of the ball was that this was supposed to be, and I believe still is, like this doesn't change in one night, but this was billed as maybe the most physical opponent you were going to face all season long in terms of both sides of the ball. And you not only matched their physicality if you're South Carolina, but you ultimately out-physicaled A&M. And, you kind of beat A&M at their own game. And
yes,
it's not that South Carolina, didn't want to be a physical. Like in some ways, South Carolina wanted to be what A&M has been this year in terms of just, hey, we're going to run the football. We're going to stop the run. Everybody wants to be that to an extent, but South Carolina very much, as we've talked about all year, because of their personnel, because of who they are on offense, after leaning heavily on the throw game last year with Spencer and Luedecke. They said, hey, this is what we have. This is what we are. We're going to lean into the running game. And as we all know, it's been, probably inconsistent is just the best way to say it. And then you go into Saturday night and you're facing a team that, let's talk about when they're on offense, one of the best rushing offenses in the SEC. And that was before they even account for the Marcel Reed aspect of the QB run. I'm talking just line it up and run the football. One of the best in the SEC. Playing against a South Carolina defensive front that, as good as they've been, I thought this was a different test for them. Like, we've seen them take over games as pass rushers and use their elite athleticism, speed at linebacker to take over games. And they have quietly been really good at stopping the run as well, if you look at them statistically. But, I think coming in, there was a world where you say A&M just takes away that pass rush element by just running the football right at them. And great pass rushers sometimes just, that's how you take them away. You sort of put their athleticism in a box and try to out physical them. And to South Carolina's credit, you have 2 4th-and-1 stops. You have a 3rd-and-1 stop that, because you had already stopped them on 4th-and-1 twice, they wanted no part of it. If you go back, if you watched at home, or if you go back and watch, the announcers are going, why aren't they going for it on 4th-and-1? And I'm like, well, because South Carolina stoned them on 2 4th-and-1s and the exact previous 3rd-and-1. Then they do the in-game interview, and Elko's like, we can't gain a yard on 3rd or 4th and short. That's why we're not going for it. And they attempt a long field goal early on instead of going for it on 4th-and-2. And so South Carolina really just did all those things that A&M wanted to do, wanted to be, and what we thought they were coming in. And then, I think we're going to need to dive into the offensive line and the run game even more here in a moment. But when I'm talking about both sides and just physicality, the offensive line, like, this is what we kind of thought, if you're a Gamecock fan, is what you kind of hoped this O-line could be entering the season. Still some pass pro busts. We'll get to Lenoris in a second. Those were erased by 16. We'll get to that. But this O-line, man, and let's go ahead. Let's dive into that, I think, specifically. O-line out-physicaled Texas A&M. And I think the most impressive part about it, and we'll get into these individual performances, the most impressive part about it, though, is that it was not just a long run by Rocket. It was not just a long run by Lenoris. It wasn't like, the explosive plays were there, but it wasn't like, let's say these are your yard totals in particular plays. It wasn't like 0, 0, 0, -1, 1, 1. Oh, there's a long run. They were able to kind of consistently, for the most part, stay ahead of the chains. Like, A&M's going to get theirs at times. Like, you're not just going to knock them back every play. That's not realistic. But over the course of the game, you're getting those 5-yard, 6-yard, 9-yard runs that just accumulate over time.
Yeah. I think you look back at without having like a side-to-side comparison, Wes, where my head went when you said that was like the LSU game, right? You had the long Rocket run, you had the long Lenoris run, but you had a whole bunch of negative plays. Now, there were a few negative plays in this game. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but you saw a lot of chain moving by South Carolina in this game, even when they weren't scoring. And that was another thing, that Carolina scored 44 points in this game. What's the highest total A&M had given up coming in? 24, I think. So you nearly double that total, right? That's impressive. But they were able to move the chains and get themselves.
It could have been more too, by the way.
It could have been more. It certainly could have been more. Yeah. It's a great point. And I think it was fascinating thinking about, hey, how will the staff, and I promise this does relate to the run game, what are they going to do schematically in this game? Because, this is an A&M front that, frankly, Wes, they caused a lot of problems against LSU, who has, as we've documented, one of the best offensive lines in the country. They really got after those guys, particularly in the second half. A&M's always loaded. So you're going into this game going, man, how is South Carolina going to block these guys in the run game? How are they going to block them in pass protection? Now, part of the solution there, take scheme out even, Lenore Sellers was special. I mean, I'm looking at the PFF numbers. They've got 9 hurries in terms of pass blocking. Those are credited hurries, right? So that typically, the way I understand it, PFF doesn't really credit, the other, discredit the offensive line or tight ends or backs on a team if they kind of bring more than you have, right? We saw all the stuff that we expected from A&M up front. They're going to bring pressure from a lot of different places, from linebacker, from the secondary. They're going to run twists. They're good enough to send 3 or 4 at you and still get pressure because they're really, really talented up front. One of the best transfers in the country, and Nick Scorton from Purdue, 2 or 3 former 5-stars up front. Like, this is a really, really good group. Lenore Sellers was special. I mean, we saw him use his IQ to wriggle out. We saw him use his just raw power and strength to wriggle out. There's one, he had 2 guys on him, and one of them's literally going to the ground holding the ball, and Lenore's just, no, this is my ball, just gets a few yards. There was one where he was it would have been like a 10-yard sack, and he spun out of that and went and gained 5 yards. So that was a big part of it, right? He was just special. But I do think you have to give credit to the O-line and the staff. And I'm getting long-winded here, I know. I think Dowell Loggins and the offensive staff came into this game saying, yeah, A&M's really good. They're really aggressive. Schematically, let's use that against them, right? So you saw some of the pin and pull stuff where they're letting guys through, just kind of walling guys off and using perimeter outside runs. Then you're out there breaking tackles. You got a lot of trash going on, and Sellers and Rocket were able to make some things happen. Oscar Attaway making some things happen. He had a 25, 27-yard run in there as well. So I thought schematically using that against A&M, using their aggressiveness, their speed, their athleticism was a positive. But then the offensive line just did a really good job at times blocking. Was it perfect? No. Could there / should there have been some sacks for big losses in there? Yeah, probably so. And I think we all expected that. It was just kind of the perfect storm up front to where you're running it well, you're keeping them off balance. Schematically, you've done a good job of giving them some new / different looks. And then just how special, a guy like Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers, those guys are really good up front. Mike Elko talked about that afterwards. Hey, at times you just got to give them credit because they're 230 pounds and 240 pounds and they're hard to tackle.
Yeah, and I think, obviously pass pro with the O-line, it's still, you look, no sacks, doesn't, like you said, it doesn't quite tell the story. Like, it's still a work in progress. Like, if we're going to sit here and be completely honest about what we saw, yes, still a work in progress. But in terms of the run game, in terms of just doing the things you wanted to do coming into this game, in terms of being just physical and playing with, some of that is a choice. And I thought South Carolina just brought the fight, man. Like, they were down for the fight. They were down for the challenge. And you just have to give those guys a ton of credit for consistently, let's steal a Muschamp phrase. They put their face in the fan pretty much all night on the O-line. And, it was impressive. It was fun to watch. One of our commenters here mentioned, as well, something you talked about, Chris, the pin and pull, like just mixing things up just enough in the run game, kind of using that bye week, I imagine, to be like, hey, let's focus on a couple of other things too, just to keep them on their toes a little bit, as opposed to being, inside zone heavy, essentially. And so that helped, that worked, and impressive. So just all 5 of those guys, man, like you got to give them credit. Even if it wasn't perfect in the pass pro part of things, you got to give them so much credit for giving you a chance to go be successful offensively in this game. And then, so Beamer talked about one of the messages. I always think it's interesting, Chris. Beamer will talk about certain things on Tuesday or Thursday, and he'll kind of give you those keys to victory. And it's kind of like the in-house version, or what he wants to get out of, like how we talk about, turnovers, you could say, are a factor in every game,
Mhm.
but you always identify what's extra important this week. And then I feel like, especially after wins, but really after most games, if you listen to the press conference and then even on the Sunday teleconference, you will get him looking back, and he'll tell you some of those things that they internally were focused on specifically going into a particular game. And I thought it was interesting. He said, he told the guys, look, ultimately, there's going to have to be some individual performances to go win this game. And what does that mean? It means, hey, we're going to need some guys that have an elite night for you to go win. And as you're watching the game and as it plays out and as South Carolina wins it, the three guys that stood out to me were the three guys that ultimately were given, we're still talking offense here, the team MVP awards for the week or for the game. And that is obviously 16, Lenora Sellers, Rocket Sanders, and Josh Simon. And you're just going, these are three like borderline just all-time performances, but also didn't feel flukish at all. Like that's just kind of who they are. One of the discussions, and we've talked about Lenoris already some. Let's talk about Rocket, man. One of the discussions on the broadcast was his health. And you can always sort of pick out, all right, the staffs, they're going to be more open with the broadcast team behind closed doors. And then you'll see the broadcast team will give little tidbits. I think we all kind of knew, but they pretty much confirmed, like, hey, Rocket has been healthy, but has Rocket been completely himself since returning from that injury? I think we saw like the healthy, like that's who Rocket Sanders is when he is at his best. I would even dare say, and I hate when people speculate on injuries, but we are kind of looking back in this case. I would even say the same thing to an extent for Lenoris. Like, he just looked a half step quicker to me on Saturday compared to, I mean, he was still making people miss the last like 3 weeks, but that little move, like one of the free rushers where Lenoris just sidestepped him.
Oh yeah.
Like it was nothing. You're like, okay, he's moving at a slightly elevated pace than we have seen. And so Lenoris, but then let's get back to Rocket, try to stay on topic here. The missed tackles that he created, the just taking it, to me, if you're going to be successful in a running game, the O-line has to give you a chance. So, and they did. It's, hey, Rocket needs to get ahead of steam. He's not a guy that, like, you don't want him getting hit in the backfield. Like, he's a big back. He needs to at least have a little bit of room to operate. But if you can give him that space, he can turn your 3-yard run into 9 yards, or your 9 yards into 20 yards, or your 20 into 50. And we kind of saw both of those things like cohesively come together. But Rocket, I mean, safe to say, our guy was on another level on Saturday night.
Yeah, he was really good, man. In the run game, he had some explosive runs. He had some tough runs. You know, you look at him in the passing game. You know, the one. It's funny because each player had a negative play. Just one. Lenore Sellers had the fumble, right? That was ultimately not a fumble because of the penalty. Had his eyes downfield, right? But that's something you look at on tape, and that's gonna be a teachable moment again. But past 2 weeks, no turnovers for Sellers. It goes in the book that way, right? And so that's certainly a positive. Rocket Sanders had the fumble, right? After a really, really good play. He was an asset in the passing game. And, you know, I listened to Beamer talk about that. I think it was Saturday night on the post game. I couldn't remember if it was that or the Sunday teleconference, but I think it was Saturday night. He said, look, we didn't have to say anything to Rocket. He knows. You saw Rocket's reaction. His towel fell off. He's picking up his towel. He's, you know, goes right back out there. And Rocket isn't a freshman. You're not going to go, is this going to affect him mentally? Do we put him back out there? No, he's right back out there, and he's helping his team win a game. And you are getting in Rocket. We've seen those glimpses, right? I think we've seen the glimpses of what we know that he is ultimately as a player. It's not a glimpse in that, like I mentioned, a freshman. Could he be this? We know what he is. He's done it for a while, and he's done it at a high level in the SEC. He's done it here at South Carolina. I think it's a great point to go back to something we talked about leading up to this game, having that full bye week. Everybody was so focused on, well, they didn't play well after the last bye week. Yeah, that was one bye week. Doesn't mean it's going to happen always, just like it doesn't mean because they've played well after bye weeks in the past that they would against Ole Miss. They clearly didn't. The biggest storyline actually for the bye week, Wes, was the full week of prep for Lenora Sellers, where you're not hobbling around and barely practicing. Same thing for Rocket Sanders, right? For him, it's less about practice time and more about just, is he 100%? Those guys looked 100%, right? So he was huge in the game. We saw him breaking tackles. I'm looking here at PFF. Looks like in the run game, 17 missed tackles forced, 8 of them by Lenora Sellers in the run game. So just crazy stuff, right? And are we spending time specifically on Lenoris here, Wes? Because I have a lot more thoughts on him.
Yeah, let's marry the two together and sort of transition over to Lenoris to Rocket in the pass game, on both ends of that, and just, man, that's such a thing that it's easy to gloss over, especially when you're watching a game live and there's just 1,000 things to focus on. But for a young quarterback, and Beamer was asked about this in the teleconference. If you want to hear his full answer, go listen to that on our YouTube. Just type in Gamecock Central on there. But Chris, for a young quarterback, you got, guys flying around, elite defensive line chasing you. Just that kind of patience to where we saw Lenoris make somebody miss, extend a play, and then say, look, I've got this former all-SEC running back just hanging out here in the flat, and let me just get the ball out to him. And so, so many times you're going to be able to, and golly, we got so much to hit, man. I thought, let me try to tie all this together. I thought great game plan from Dow Loggins, and we'll talk about this more, but they're a heavy man coverage team, and that was definitely the case on Saturday. That's one of my favorite things to try to – some teams you can't always tell, but I'm always like, all right, what are they in? What are they in? Can I tell from the stands? Every time I was paying attention to that, oh, more man coverage, more man coverage, more man coverage. Well, when all your routes run everybody off and those guys are playing man coverage, if you have routes going down the field, the corners are having to follow them way down the field. So what does that open up? QB run game. What does that open up? Your running back, especially if you have an aggressive defense to where they'll do like the green dog stuff where, hey, if the running back's not going out into a pattern, that linebacker can just tack on and rush you. Or even if they're just out there covering Rocket, you put Rocket in a one-on-one situation, and now the receivers have run off all those cornerbacks down the field. So if you're a defense, you're kind of in a bind because you're sitting there, all right, you're hyper aware of Lenoris. Is he about to take off running? And then he just, in the flow of a play, flips the ball out to 5. And now he has space and a one-on-one situation with the guy covering him. And we saw that time and time again. So just the progression of Lenoris, the development of Lenoris to just be willing, hey, I don't have to throw the ball down the field. I can check this thing down and we can still get big plays against this defense. I mean, I thought that was just fantastic, man. We'll talk about Josh Simon and some of the throws and plays he made as well there. But Lenoris overall, just kind of knowing when to take off, knowing when to put his head down, and legitimately just, hey, put your foot down, put your head down, and let's just turn this into a running play, knowing when to drop it off. We didn't really see them hit many throws down the field, but they were at least taking a couple of shots just to keep A&M cognizant of it, I think, because, dude, they were firing those safeties left and right into the backfield on blitzes. And so you got to keep them honest, but Lenoris worked the game plan to perfection. And one thing Cole Kubelik always talks about, just his understanding of the run game. Like, he's still developing in terms of him as a passer, but his feel for the run game, when to keep, when to run, when to hand it off, is pretty elite for a redshirt freshman quarterback.
He does a lot of things elite for a redshirt freshman quarterback. He does some elite things for any level of quarterback, I think we could say.
So, Chris, can we confirm he's an SEC quarterback for?
I think he might have gotten there. I have some thoughts on that. I'm gonna start a crow eating thread for people who want to have a mea culpa to come in on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central. But man, yeah, so many thoughts on Sellers. You know, he made the right play so many times, you know, and it's really awesome to watch him. You know, he's just executing things as time goes on, right? At a higher level. He can run an offense, he can make things happen for you. He can make you right when things break down, as they inevitably will on offense against the schedule that South Carolina plays. Real quick, while I'm thinking about it, you mentioned in the deep shots made me think of this. I don't know if anybody could complain about hardly anything in this game. Like, nobody could say, run the ball. They ran it. Throw the ball downfield. They tried. Throw the ball to Nick Harbor. They did multiple times. Throw screens. They did that. Dump it off. Check it down. They did that. Throw slants. They did that. Like, there's like everything in this game, right? And that won't happen every week, but it happened in this one. So enjoy that part. But yeah, man, I mean, it just shows, and Beamer touched on this too on Saturday, you know, and I think he's right on this. You know, Lenoris Sellers, the second college football game that he played where he was fully healthy and played the full game, was at Alabama, right? That's the second. He played against Old Dominion, if you don't believe me. Played against Old Dominion. That was his very first start. Next week, he goes on the road at Kentucky. USC wins. Didn't play the whole game. Against LSU at home, didn't play the whole game. Against Ole Miss, it's just kind of like get him to Saturday. Obviously, nobody played well in that one, but he wasn't healthy fully in that game. So literally his second college football game where he's probably 100% and has played the entire game is at Alabama. Next 2 weeks, what do you get? At Oklahoma, huge win, played great. Home at A&M against top 10 team, played great. So I would go as far as say, Wes, not only was it silly and premature to say he can't play, he's not the answer, give up on him. It was stupid, to be honest. It was just stupid. Even in a world where we have heightened expectations and things need to happen right now. Now, let me also say this, to be fair. Will Lenoris Sellers have that type of performance in every other game the rest of this season? I don't think so, because that was, even for somebody as talented as him, you go, wow, that was really a performance. But that does show why everybody was so high on him. You remember, I mean, we and some other fans, from that vocal minority who had already given up on him after 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, all y'all overhyped him. No, we said that he's supremely talented and would go through some growing pains. And I think both of those things have proven to be true. And that's not a back pat. It's just, Wes, people who have been watching college football for a long time that have seen this kid, and some of these same people, when they talk about Lenoris Sellers, they go, man, he's talented. And we are seeing why. He does things on the football field that are special, that you don't talk about SEC quarterbacks. Most SEC quarterbacks cannot do some of the things that he can do. So as it continues to come together, you got something potentially special here in Sellers.
Yeah, and I think to your point, man, like, is it going to look exactly the same every week? Of course not. Will he have a bad game at some point? Of course, every quarterback does. But I think the exciting thing, if you're a Gamecock fan, is that most of what we saw on Saturday is repeatable. Like, it's not like this was a fluke performance. Like, that athleticism that we saw, the ability in the run game, that's going to, like, that travels, so to speak. We say that when we talk about the defense, but that travels. And so that's just part of who he is. The scary thing, what happens as the passing game continues to come along? There were a couple of just, honestly, for Lenoir, if you want to get nitpicky, he actually misses some of the easier throws, I feel like, and then will make some of those tight window throws. So as those come along, as frankly, as the receivers get better and you have a little more separation, then who knows what this kid could be. Like, I think we all kind of have a vision for what it could look like. But I mean, there's not much of a ceiling you want to put on Lenora Sellers. Like, it really could be maybe as much as something we've just never seen before at South Carolina in terms of the combination. And I'm talking like skill set, the combination of runner and passer that he could ultimately be is pretty special to think about. So I don't know, man. Like, it's exciting for fans, exciting for Lenoir's. The great thing about Sellers, though, is you're just going to get this, right? And for those who are just listening, even kill is not going to get too high, not going to get too low, and it's just going to be himself, which ultimately is what you need in a quarterback moving forward. By the way, Chris, I don't think we did a Monday show last week and during the bye, or we didn't. Maybe we did. I don't know. It's all run together. But let me make sure today that we tell our friends about our friends at Game Time. And so there's 4 games left on the regular season. South Carolina now not bowl eligible yet, but probably have set themselves up. I think we would all agree to go to a bowl game. So hopefully 5 games left for South Carolina in football. Men's basketball starting tonight. Women's basketball starting tonight. So if you need tickets, go on over gametime.co.com or just download the Game Time app. And the beautiful thing about the app, I'm pulling up Missouri tickets right now. The thing I like to do, I like to hit the GT Picks toggle button and personally the all-in pricing, because there's nothing worse than if you're buying from a ticket app and finding out how much you're actually paying when you get ready to actually pay. So hit the all-in pricing and you're going to find out exactly what that ticket costs initially before you get through all those other steps of buying it. Super easy. They also have super deals that sort of lock in at the top so you can see which tickets. This one right here says top 1% of value of all tickets being sold right now. This is for Missouri at South Carolina on November 16th. Also, as we always tell you, use the code ON3. You'll get $20 off. Terms apply, but you'll get $20 off if you're a new member there on the Game Time app. So shout out to our friends at Game Time, gametime.co, or just download the Game Time app. And dude, we got to talk defense too, but don't want to go too far without mentioning our guy, Josh Simon from Dalzell, South Carolina.
The pride of Crestwood High.
What a stud, dude. We knew Josh was good. Like, I think we both knew. We were like, when Josh came in, we're like, hey, it's going to be a good pickup. This guy's going to help this team. Man, he had a day. And didn't feel fluky for him either. Like, that's just kind of who he is. They did a good job of finding him some space. Actually, only 4 catches. It felt like more, but 4 catches. And he took well advantage of those 4 catches. 132 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Was also very active in the blocking game, being physical. Is not scared to block you. Like, this is a Sean Elliott tight end right here, I feel like. Like, I got a feeling those 2 guys probably get along pretty well in terms of their mindset about things. And I'm hoping Josh is playing himself into an NFL opportunity, man, because he was special on Saturday. And when you let's kind of tie this into Dow a little bit too. When you face these heavy man teams, if they can cover you, which A&M could, it really becomes about running backs and tight ends because that's where your mismatches are. And for Carolina, I actually thought we might see a little more Michael Smith, but it just never kind of happened. It never played out like that. He was on the field, but I thought he might make a few plays in this game. We saw Josh making plays, as we talked about a moment ago. We saw Rocket making plays in the pass game. And this is a cool story to just think about him coming back home, getting to play for his home state as a transfer, and really helping put his stamp on this team, on this program, the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, in a game like this, it's a great point. It's about your matchups, and it is about making plays where this is why recruiting is so important, Wes. A lot of times in football, when things are this close, it comes down to my guy's better than yours. And back to your point that Shane Beamer made this week, hey, we're going to have some great individual performances. Yes, it's a team effort. It was a team win, Wes. But if Lenoris Sellers doesn't pull I've seen a lot of people, his Houdini act, that he was able to pull in so many plays. If he can't do things like running over a corner on a third down run and just running a guy over to move the chains, if Rocket Sanders isn't Rocket, and if Josh Simon isn't Josh Simon, South Carolina might not win that game, right? You got a kid who's just big, physical. He's a grown. You look at Josh Simon, he looks like a grown man because that's what he is. You got a guy who's in his 6th year of college ball, who set records at Western Kentucky, who was under-recruited, should have already been an SEC player. But this is the beauty of the portal. If you're South Carolina, you can come back and say, hey, this guy flew under the radar. He should already be here, but now we're going to go grab him. You go get him, and you see what you get. So he was huge. He's been really good. Thing about Josh is he's tough. He's willing to mix it up. He can run routes, right? We saw the play, another great play by Sellers, throwing that football under duress on the throwback type of play to Josh Simon for the touchdown. But he can make things happen for you in space too. That little play to the flat that's kind of like an RPO has been money for them at times this year. And he made some things happen on that play as well. So been really cool to watch Josh, and he's a good kid for sure.
Yeah, as we're sitting here, Chris, Beamer tweets out a welcome home. Something to keep an eye on there. We by the way, we have plenty of reactions and information on the official visitors who were on campus this weekend. Some of them heavy South Carolina leans, some of them with decisions coming up soon. So keep an eye on that. Good weekend for the Gamecocks. We'll, of course, have complete coverage of all the recruiting happenings on Gamecock Central. Be on the lookout as well. We're going to have a new update to the recruiting rundown later on today on the Gamecock Central YouTube as well. Talk to Kendall Smith. We're going to record that this afternoon. Probably have that up late this afternoon, early evening. So be on the lookout for that. But Chris, let's talk defense, man. We've given lots of love to the offense, and they deserved it. But the defense, let's go back to what we were talking about in the open. Physicality. And rightfully so, everybody talks about the pass rush and the athleticism and the speed and all those things. And again, rightfully so. I thought this was a new test for this defensive front because, as we know, football is about matchups. And sometimes you may have the better matchup. Sometimes the opponent may have the better matchup. And it might not even be necessarily that they're more talented or you're more talented. It's just more, hey, they have a different skill set. And the fun thing about football is it's like, all right, let's say you face a great run blocking O-line against a great pass rushing defensive front. And first down, second down, they may own you in the running game, But if you can get them in 3rd and long, or you can get a big lead, then you may own them. And that's kind of the beauty of football. The fun thing about this game, Chris, is Carolina and their super athletic defensive front took the fight to A&M in the run game and sort of run defense. And to give credit where it's due, for much of this game, A&M's O-line held up much more than I thought they might against Carolina's pass rush. Like, both sides, I thought, stepped up and kind of matched their opponent in terms of something that was considered a strength for the opponent. But for Carolina to stop A&M on 4th and 1, then 4th and 1, then 3rd and 1, to force them to not even be willing to go for it on 4th and 1, might have been the difference in the game. And you can't say enough good things about the guys at all 3 levels of this defense, or about Clayton White, Sterling Lucas, Torian Gray, Travian Robertson, like everybody on that side of the ball. This was a team effort, but it did all start up front, I think, and just being willing to go and defend the run and be physical and get stops on these short yardage situations, which is not easy to do against a big front like A&M has.
Yeah, and A&M was without the guy that a lot of people say is their best guy overall, interior guy Chase Basantis. He's been out. He missed this game. But that was one thing you wondered about, right? Like, their left tackle, Trey Zune, has been outstanding this year. Coming into this game, Wes had not given up a sack, had not even given up a hit on the quarterback. And guess who got the first one? Is Dylan Stewart, as a freshman, who is blowing any other freshman in the country completely out of the water with what he's done statistically, or if you just want to go off the eyeball test. Early on, A&M did do a fantastic job. I think you got to give them a lot of credit for how they administered their offense. It was a huge difference that Carolina was able to stop those short runs and prevent them from getting first downs and moving the chains. Could have been a much, much different, would have been, I think, a much different ball game. But A&M, you're sitting there in the 3rd quarter, and you and I were actually watching this game together, Wes, and you're like, man, both of us are kind of like, A&M's really holding up here. And I think they did it a variety of ways. Number one, give Marcel Reed credit, man. I was impressed with how he played. He got the ball out just on time a lot of times. They were able to move the pocket a little bit. They used some play action, used some RPO stuff, a lot of short passes. So schematically, that A&M had that in the back of their mind. We can't have Marcel Reed sitting back here all day trying to throw the ball downfield. So you saw a lot of short passes, a lot of hitches, things like that. But eventually, Carolina built that cushion, built that lead. And Mike Elko was very frank about this after the game. He said it became more of a situation where we had to pass a little bit more. That the clock, you start feeling the clock if you're A&M. And we got to make some things happen. We don't have time to drive up and down the field. Heck, we haven't even run the ball very well in short yardage, right? You got to throw some. That's when the pressure's on. And you just felt like South Carolina hasn't gotten one yet, but it's building. And then you see Dylan Stewart, TJ Sanders going back to back. You see the pick from Marcel Reed. Even they put the ball on the ground a couple of times and they were able to get it. You saw that pressure mounting, and A&M, the thing that Elko said that was very honest, said, we're not built to play that way. We're not built to play from behind, throwing the ball down the field. That played into exactly what South Carolina's strength is, which is building that lead, leaning on the defense, letting your guys up front do damage for you.
Yeah, you kind of felt like if they could finally get to that place where down distance or just game flow kind of would let them do that they could get to him. And that was the case. Like, I feel like A&M played this thing. Like, even when they were down early, there was no panic. And they kind of played it, in my opinion, a little bit like, I don't know, and maybe it's both these things. A&M, even down 14-0, I think firmly still thought they were going to win the game. Like they didn't play it like they had to panic at that point. Also, Chris, I felt like A&M played it a little bit like a defensive-minded head coach does. Like, yes, he did go for it on the 4th and shorts, but that's not even really controversial anymore. Like the analytics basically tell you should go for a 4th and 1 almost anywhere on the field. Now, coaches don't always do that, but you really, like, the analytics say go. They got away from that a little bit because of what South Carolina had done, but I'm talking more field goal decisions early on, choosing to kind of down a couple of scores. Hey, we're just going to break the ice here. There's a long way to go. We feel good about our team. You want to talk about Carolina again beating A&M at their own game? This was supposed to be a second half A&M team. This was a team that has built itself on adjustments. It was South Carolina that outscored them 24-0 in the second half. And so I think ultimately time, game situation did let South Carolina kind of pin their ears back. Even Chris, I know a 4th and 21 is like your chances of converting that are just minuscule. But I'm going, hey, there's 5 minutes left and you're down 2 scores and you're around the 50-yard line. Like, I know you have faith in your defense, but was that not kind of a go time for like?
Yeah,
Now you're rocking a hard place, right? Like,
oh yeah, you can't you could make or not make a decision, and one of us and A&M fans and Gamecock fans are sitting there going, "Why'd you do that?" or "Why did you not do that?" Like
yeah.
It's either way. It's kind of tough. You're not in a great spot. They had two timeouts at that point. I think they had to burn one earlier in the second half. If you don't get it, the game's 100% over. If you punt it, or as close to 100% as you can get in that situation, if you punt it, maybe you're banking on, let's get a few quick stops, get the ball back, score, onside kick, right? Like you're playing bad percentages on both sides there. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're getting into when you punt that ball away, you're almost guaranteeing if you have any chance to win that it's going to involve an onside kick. If you convert a miracle 4th and 21, you take the onside kick out because you're hoping you can score, kick it off, and then use your timeouts in the 2-minute to get the ball back. So I don't know. It's rocking a hard place, but he did kind of manage it like a defensive-minded head coach for much of the game. I felt like just in terms of kicking field goals, saying, "Hey, we're going to get points and go from there." But I mean, to his credit, in the first half, it did work. Like they didn't panic. They got the ball. They took the lead at the end of the half. They played their sort of end of half offense perfectly. You think they're going to go to the half of the lead, and I want to talk about something there, Chris. How about the fact a couple of other things Beamer had circled? One, tackling. Carolina's defense tackled better than A&M's defense. They just did. We talked about all the forced missed tackles from South Carolina's offense. Some of that you credit Carolina's offensive guys for making them do that.
Yep.
But I bet it was an ugly team meeting in the defensive meeting room for A&M on Sunday.
Yep.
How many times do you think if you're looking at it from like their perspective, like from a Carolina perspective, you're going, hey, Lenoris was fantastic. From their mindset, they're going, how many times do we have the quarterback in our sights and missed?
Yep.
And you look at Carolina on defense, not that there weren't, missed tackles here and there. Not, you had the little bust where they had the long run. Some of that, Chris, I chalked up to, A&M is going to get theirs. Like, they are a good football team. You're not going to just shut them out. You're not going to just shut them down. A lot of those windows, you and I were watching from the end zone view. So you kind of get that almost like a quarterback view, or like if you're playing the video game, kind of you're behind the play. these linebackers are so quick and so fast. There were some plays where initially you're like, oh, there's a hole there. But these linebackers just shut it down very quickly. That has not always been the case for South Carolina defenses in recent memory. But they also, for the most part, tackled very well. A&M did not. I thought that was a difference maker. And Carolina, as much as we have talked about penalties, A&M was the team that had the killer penalties. South Carolina had no penalties in the first half. I'm thinking there was a delay of game where Carolina chose to punt. And this is in the second half. There's a delay of game where Carolina's choosing to punt, I think. So they took the delay on purpose. There was a face mask on the sideline called on Carolina. That was honestly, it was probably a face mask, but looked a little questionable. For the most part, though, it was A&M making the killer penalties. And, dude, when they review that film and it clicks that they essentially give Carolina an opportunity for a field goal at the end of the half. Because if you go back and watch, that entire drive was based on penalties by A&M.
Yep.
How big did that field goal feel? Travis points out, yeah, the drop kick in the first. I stole that from a graphic. Like I swear ABC said no penalties for Carolina in the first half, but there was the drop kick out of bounds. So Travis is right. Regardless, point stands. A&M, some killer penalties. I don't want to say they gifted you a field goal because you had to go make it. And as we're doing our kudos, let's give Alex Herrera kudos for hitting all of his opportunities. But they gave you, in many ways, an opportunity to get 3. You converted on that. It just felt different being 20-20 at half versus being down at the half after everything that had happened.
Yeah, exactly. And, A&M with remember, that would have been not only just a play where you got some field position because of the penalty, Wes, but that was a fumble, right? So A&M's getting the ball back. You probably don't have time to go score, but you're down, but then you're up at the half if you're A&M. So that was huge. You're right. I was going to mention that by the time the show ended on Alex Herrera. That's another one, Wes, where, look, we said going into the year, Gamecock fans are spoiled, right? This isn't the NFL yet. College kickers even have gotten a lot better over the years and more consistent. But Carolina's not going to be as consistent there. You're not going to feel like, 53-yard field goal is probably going through. Probably not going to feel like that. But, some just straw men like built right against Alex. Like I saw so many times, can't anything over 40 yards is not. He's 6 of 8 on 40-yarders. He made 2 in the game. So I think he's progressed and gotten better and gotten a little bit more comfortable, right? And we'll see. There are probably going to be some big kicks down the stretch of this season, and we'll see how that goes. But this was a game that you needed some kicks. You needed to make some big kicks. That was a big one before the half, and he answered. So good for him. But, yeah, that was another thing. These two teams came in penalized pretty heavily. The Gamecocks played a clean game. They didn't have, when they did have penalties, it wasn't just these killer penalties, and they really didn't have many even to begin with, Wes. One more point before I turn it back over to you. Just because you mentioned the missed tackles by the Gamecock defense, you got to guess, if you don't already know, at how many South Carolina had missed tackles this game.
Do you have how many A&M had as well?
I do.
I mean, I'm sure I'm missing a couple of them, man. 5 for Carolina.
7 for PFF for Carolina. That's a really good number. Really good number. And Carolina caught a break. Another one I mentioned earlier, Le'Veon Moss not in the game, but I mean, Amari Daniels ran for a touchdown, long touchdown. Marcel Reed's really good. Like, they're talented, right? And they're good up front. So that's a great number. What about A&M? You got
Like, it felt like about 20 or 25, honestly. Like,
they had
somewhere.
25 credited missed tackles.
Whew. It felt like it, though, dude.
It did. It did 100%.
And I bet if you add up Lenoris, Rocket, and Josh, that's about 24 of them. I mean, I think Attaway probably had one or two in there, but that's crazy. All right. Let's close this thing out. Let's go big picture, man. I I gotta share this. I know most of you have probably seen it by now. Our guy Spencer Hall, Chris. Chris, you want to do me a favor and read this for our audio only folks out there from Spencer Hall, who has some of the most just out there great takes. And I bring this up just to give the final credit for this game, which is to the South Carolina fan base. Special atmosphere. There's a lot of tweets going around from people either watching at home. Apparently the ESPN 4K feed doesn't do commercials. It just shows the atmosphere during breaks. Lots of people being introduced. There were some tweets from A&M fans talking about, man, this was an incredible environment. There was a Virginia Tech fan I saw who posted, like, this is his first ever South Carolina game. He was like, y'all blow VT's atmosphere out of the water. Special atmosphere. But Spencer Hall sums it up to a T, in my opinion.
You just went down by 3 scores. Finnish techno deafened you, and a man named Mudcat, who has shot 3 people in his hometown without charges being filed, is throwing beer at you from the stands. A rooster crows forever on the PA. You are losing a game at South Carolina.
Perfection.
Yes, a poem by Spencer Hall. that captures it perfectly.
Yeah,
it just turns into a nightmare, right? And I wrote some version of this, and what I wrote was not anywhere close to what Spencer wrote or how he captured it. As usual, he's brilliant. Don't know how he even comes up with things like that in his brain. But
he has a different brain.
But the night began, Wes. Awesome atmosphere. I mean, we were talking about it before the game. This wasn't a pseudo sellout, like a fake sellout. The corners were full. Everybody was keyed up. Everybody was hopeful, ready to, explode in that stadium. And then by the end of the night, it's the fourth quarter. You're winning. You're obviously going to win, right? It's not coming down to the last play. You're going to win the game. And you're able to bust out Texas A&M's home entrance song with a couple minutes left to go in the fourth quarter as a troll. That's a good night.
Great night, man. So I'm going to close it out, Chris, with some kudos to Gamecock Nation. I also have a challenge for Gamecock Nation.
Oh, here we go.
I got a challenge. Here's my challenge. So you just beat number 10 at home, right? And I have no problem with the fact Carolina rushed the field like the fans did. I thought this was right on the line of whether you should rush the field or not. But with what you've been through this year, having the lead over LSU at home, getting blown out by Ole Miss at home, the experience watching at home or going to Alabama, it kind of felt like you were exercising some demons on Saturday. Kind of all came together. Have at it. Storm the field, celebrate it, Enjoy it on Saturday. But this was not an upset. Like, A&M was a 2.5, I don't know what it closed at, 3 points, 2.5, 1.5, whatever. The win over Tennessee a couple years ago, that was an upset. Like, that was just the heavens opened up. Everything went perfect on a night, right? This was not an upset. You just beat A&M. You didn't flukishly beat A&M. You just beat them. And it is what it is. And they can't go back and the kids these days say cope. Cope. There's no cope here. Like, Carolina just beat A&M. So here's the challenge. I've been watching Carolina football since I was like 3 years old. And now I have the great honor of being around it and covering it. How many freaking times have I watched Carolina win a huge game and then it carries over into the next week, into the next game, into the next we're well past the 24-hour rule and we're still just talking about the previous game. And the fan base plays a part in that, Chris. And so y'all, I mean this in a loving way, y'all are crazy in the best way possible. So when Carolina's down, y'all get extra down. When Carolina's up, y'all get extra up. My challenge, act like you've been here before. You were supposed to beat number 10. Y'all, South Carolina was the better team on Saturday. This is not an upset. The next step for South Carolina as a football program, as a fan base, is to be like, all right, we beat A&M. Let's start talking about Vandy. Let's look ahead, focus on the next game. Don't, if you're a student, don't hype up the guys in class all week long and build their heads up. And like the legitimate program you want to be is the program that says, yeah, we beat number 10. We expected to beat A&M, and we just went out and did it. So you celebrate it on Saturday night and on Sunday, but then you just move on. So that's my challenge. Enjoy it, but then move on, because a special season is still in play at this point. But it all entirely depends on everybody in that building, and I would argue everybody out of that building, to just turn the page and get ready for Vandy.
I think we should end it there.
All right. That's all I got to say. That's Chris. I'm Wes. Enjoyed it. Appreciate y'all hopping on. It's been a blast. We'll be back Tuesday to talk about Vandy. We'll see you then.